Dear viewers, welcome to the second International Sweco lecture. I am Martijn Steenstra, expert leader Urban Insight and active as a consultant in the Netherlands. Urban Insight is Sweco's international knowledge program. Through Urban Insight, we share unique insights into sustainable urban development and discuss these with our clients and with society. What did we focus on in 2020? It was on climate action. As you know, climate change is one of the biggest challenges that humankind is facing at these days. How do we mitigate climate change and decrease our footprint? How do we adapt our cities to increasing heat and to heavy rainfall and floods and droughts? And how do we do this while developing our cities to meet the demands of tomorrow? These are the challenges, and these are the subjects of the 6 Urban Insight reports that we have published this year. The latest report, Going Circular, A Vision for Urban Transition, explores the relationship between circular area development, climate adaptation and climate mitigation. It questions how to avoid being disruptive and wasteful, and shows how circular area development can create interesting and unique urban environments with a lower footprint. A circular approach can lead to more attractive and appreciated urban areas. Today's lecture will be given by Professor Ellen van Bueren, Professor in Urban Development Management at the Technical University of Delft. She focuses in her research on circular area development. She researches why circular area development is important and how we can work together to achieve this. Today she will share her insights using cases from around Europe. During the presentations, you can chat and discuss in the YouTube chat. For now again, a warm welcome to Ellen van Bueren and to all viewers. Enjoy the lecture, get inspired and see what you can do to contribute to sustainable urban development.
Warm welcome to you all to this Urban Insight lecture supported by Sweco. My name is Ellen van Bueren. I'm Professor of Urban Development Management at the Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment at Delft University of Technology. And today I have the pleasure to share my insights on circular development of buildings and cities. And I am going to explain to you the why, what and how of circular buildings and circular cities, and how to make the jump from getting from circular buildings to circular city development. At this first slide you see this wonderful picture of taken in the city of Amsterdam. The new development, it's called Clean Ship, schoon schip as they say in Dutch. And this initiative was started by citizens, actually, who wanted to have an affordable and clean and circular living environment, and especially also energy efficient. And well, this is a very nice example, and I would urge you to look the project up at the website, where they have much more information on it. It is a very nice example of how you can make cities more circular on a from a very bottom-up level as well, and to see what it could offer to us. So it's not just the buildings, but also the community involved. But let me take you through the slides and see where we get this hour. I will tell you more first about why. Why do we need to develop our cities in a circular way? Well, I guess also the Sweco report also mentioned it already, and I think climate change is happening all around us. So there are already quite some, I guess you're quite familiar with the reasons of why we need to become circular. But nevertheless, I want to share with you this recent publication of last week, stating that global human-made mass exceeds all living biomass. Another fact made by humankind, another milestone achieved, you could say. And it's really incredible all the materials that we extract from our earth and that we produce, and that we also perhaps not use in the most sustainable and responsible way. After all, we only have one planet, and we should be careful with the planet, with the resources that are there and the living climate that we need as humankind. Cities are of particular interest to people, policymakers, companies interested in making our planet more sustainable, because they are sources and sinks of pollution, of material use, and cities, by developing them, you need a lot of materials, but also for the operation and maintenance, of course, you need a lot of materials and resources as well. At the same time, they are huge sinks of material use, since lots of the materials that we extracted and manufactured and produced into building products and buildings and infrastructures, they are stored in there. So whatever we have used, it is also, you could consider it as a sink, as a mine, potential mine of the future as well, perhaps for reuse. There was also this briefing by the European Energy Agency on construction and demolition waste. It is one of the biggest waste producing sectors as well. So we need to be really careful about what we use and whether we just dispose of it when we no longer need it. And especially when we look at construction and demolition waste, and that is also why the construction sector and the built environment comes up amongst policymakers whenever they try to look for opportunities to become more circular, that this built environment pops up, because this construction and demolition waste is really one of the big waste streams in Europe, but all over the world. And when you look at the figures of construction and demolition waste production, you see that a considerable amount of this waste is being reused, but in a very low quality. So it is mainly recycled, and when recycled, it is used in a very degraded quality form, and also of a low value. So when you look at the recycling percentages of construction and demolition waste, you might think, okay, we're not doing so bad. But when you look at how what we actually do with the recycled content, then you could wonder, well, is this really the wisest way to use our materials, our precious materials? Another aspect of circularity concerns the urban aspect, the urban dimension. What you see when looking at cities, a city is more than just a collection of buildings and infrastructures. So here you see, for example, in Mexico City, I took this picture of a recycle shop where people can bring their waste sorted. And it is reproduced, or it is selected and considered for a next purpose in life, whether it is reusable or could be reproduced, remanufactured, or perhaps should end up in the incinerator or at the waste dump. But this picture shows that there is also an economic activity involved in the reuse of materials, and that it also is closely connected to our daily lives and the stuff we use and what we do with it afterwards. And also within cities, this urban dimension of the people and the places needed to become circular, that is an aspect that has been neglected to a considerable extent thus far. And I think that especially when we want to continue our work on making our cities more sustainable, it is especially this aspect that should gain more attention, in addition to, of course, all the efforts we have made thus far in the field of sustainable and circular buildings. So what is circular development of urban areas? I'm gonna tell you a bit more now on the different understandings of circular economy in relation to buildings, built environment and cities. And this is also a moment where I would like to invite you to use the chat function that is available during this lecture. Unfortunately, I cannot see the chat function. It is really a mono-directional talk I'm giving now because of the wide audience that is viewing. But please share your comments and thoughts and questions on the chat. Get into a discussion with each other, and I'll also have a look at the chat session afterwards, and also the Sweco colleagues, of course, will go over it and see what kind of questions or issues they can address afterwards. So please reach out and go and discuss. Yeah, there are many different understandings of circular economy. And I now briefly go into the essence of a circular economy. And here you see a very simple graph showing the key aspects of it. So the top arrow shows the linear economy, as we have come to call it after we conceptualized the circular economy, and it visualizes our present state of mind on how we use resources. So we take, make and waste, essentially. And so there is the resources, they go through the chain in a very quick way, and they will be disposed of very quickly after usage. Now the circular economy states that we should reduce our input and try to close the loop. So once we use any material, we should aim to reuse it or use it as long as possible when it is no longer, where there is no longer a need of it, or if it needs repairing, we should repair it, maintain it, remanufacture it and reproduce it. And we should try to keep the quality as high as possible throughout that process. And if you look at the graph, then you see that you need to reduce the input. If there is an output, we should avoid it as much as possible. But if there is, we should make sure that we get rid of it in a very responsible way. And the economic principle underlying this all is that the thought is that reduction and reuse of non-renewable resources. Oh, and I see a very big mistake, I think, in the slide. The reduction and reuse of renewable resources pays, and the reduction and the use of non-renewable resources, it doesn't pay. So it gets more expensive to use virgin materials. So you want to, there is an inherent incentive, an economic incentive to use renewable resources and to use all the resources as long as possible in a high quality as possible. But then you come to the fact that this assumes a scarcity of resources to get that economic incentive. And that scarcity can be there in a natural way. So when we run out of resources, there will be a scarcity and prices will go up. And we will have a sort of natural incentive to act responsibly. But as long as this is not the case, and for many materials this is not the case by far, we need to create this scarcity in an artificial way. And then you can think of taxing, regulation, subsidies, But you need to make sure that these incentives are created if you really want to stimulate this economic behavior. But then there are many aspects to this circular economy, and also when applied to the built environment. And here you see a graph produced by my colleagues. We've got this circular built environment hub at our Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment to bring together all the different research that we do on the circular built environment. And it can range from the level of materials to components to buildings and cities and even regions. And as you can also see, and those are the diagonal aspects being addressed. It can be about flows and resources, which is of course the first thing we often think about when talking about circularity. But it can also be technology-oriented, management-oriented, about society and stakeholders, and also design, because design is also very important if you want to reuse a material or product, component, building in the future. You need to make sure that in the design of it, you already account for it. But what makes it so complex? Because this graph, even though it has many components, it seems quite accessible. But if you go into it and dive into it in more detail, then you see that closing loops at higher scales is more complex than at lower scales. There will be more actors involved, the definitions become more vague, more ambiguous, and it will be more challenging to see what is a good measure to take, how to really make sure that I close the loop. And then you come to questions, okay, on what level should I close it? Should it be on the material level, on the, and that material, should it be embodied already in a product, or what if it's embodied in a building? Should I then try to save and reuse the building at all costs, or should I do it at the component level? So those kind of questions become apparent then. And then you also see that the higher up the scale you go, the more and more actors will be involved, coming from different sectors and coming from the public and the private sector as well. So it will be a very difficult setting to organize and coordinate, and such coordination mechanisms are usually absent. So now when we think of, well, why is it so challenging to have this circular built environment, even though it sounds so logical? Then there are two fundamentally different approaches to circularity that we can identify at the moment. And it is important to understand these different approaches, because there are two different discourses, all preferring different solutions. And I think, and that is also one of the messages I want to give to you in this lecture, is that having the debate about how they match and can fit into each other, these different approaches, that is something that is very important to learn about together, because it is, there are no known solutions yet, but together we should try and come to solutions. But I'll introduce these different approaches to circularity. On my slide, on the left-hand side, you see there is one approach that is about the closing of resource loops, and it is especially focused on supply chains, and supply chains have become, in our last century, have become footloose. So it is especially about cleaning and greening supply chains and making them more efficient and closing the loop at that level. And then you really think in terms of products and services that come along that help to close this loop. And this is quite a dominant focus thus far. In recent years, you see more and more cities that have become concerned with circular economy and circular development as well. And that draws back on another perspective, a more urban perspective, of regenerative urban metabolism, I have called it. And that focuses really on the regenerative conditions of cities. So how can you make sure that a city can sustain itself in the future? How can it reproduce itself as well? Grow back material sources, for example. And that is a more place-based understanding of circularity. And this place-based understanding makes that you will have different requirements or different preferences, so to say, on what level of scale you want to close the loops. But I will go into each of these two approaches, and then we will see what are the advantages and disadvantages of each and where could they fit into each other. So the supply chain perspective, that is a perspective that is especially promoted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, a foundation that really pushed the term of circular economy, and I'm sure most of you must have heard of this initiative and the wonderful work they've done thus far and are still doing. And this is a picture of the butterfly diagram, they call it, of how to close the biological cycles and the material cycles in the world. And here you see again at the different levels of scale at which you might want to close these loops. Also in the Netherlands, we have been following the Ellen MacArthur Foundation closely and the initiatives, and it has brought up a debate and policy ambitions and goals emphasized by national government that we should become circular, completely circular by the year 2050. And for the building sector, it popped up the question, okay, how will we be doing that? And one of the questions was also, well, how could we define or how could we frame circular building or a circular built environment? And I had the pleasure to be part of an action team, it was called, of sector-wide participants of the construction and building sector, acting on all different kinds of levels. And they have come up with a definition of circular building, and it says that it is concerned with the development, use and reuse of buildings, areas and infrastructures without unnecessarily exhausting natural resources, polluting the living environment and negatively impacting ecosystems, and building in an ecologically and economically responsible way that contributes to the well-being of humans and animals, now and in the future, here and in other places. So a mouthful, of course, inspired by many other definitions that go around. And I must say, there are many definitions that you can give of these concepts. I think the most important thing is that you find a definition that works, that is inspiring, that sets criteria for measuring progress, etc., or that you can use as a basis for further operationalization and taking action. And this is such just one of the many examples that are around there of how we in the Netherlands have tackled this definition problem. But of course now the question is, okay, how to take action then? And I will now take you through some examples of circular actions and innovations that have taken place at various levels in the built environment. The first one is on the level of materials. Here you see stones of the stone cycling company, which recycled stones that have been used in housing, building production, and can now be reused in a new shape. Besides innovating on a material level, There are innovations possible, of course, on the level of the building components. And you can think of the carpeting and flooring, which is more connected to the interior side of buildings. But you can also think of circular kitchens, which is, and you see a picture of that also on the slide. Kitchens are usually replaced in a sometimes a quick way, but you can also think of, well, how to replace parts of it, or how to replace it in such a way that it can be remanufactured and reused next time. And at another level of scale, again, you see there one of our faculties as well at TU Delft. It's an example of an experiment of perhaps trying to reuse the facade. And this is a facade with all the high technology needed for operating the building systems included in there. And the idea is, if you concentrate it in one place, then you might perhaps also come up with a business model for this facade. So you can lease it, and you can always make sure that you have the most up-to-date and also often more energy efficient, more resource efficient technologies available. Well, these are some of the ideas that we have used, that we have come across in the Netherlands in innovating for circular materials and circular buildings. And one of the principles that is key to that is that you start from the design perspective. And a very popular way of communicating this message is by using the figure coined by Stuart Brand, with the different building layers. And design for adaptation and reuse requires the arrangement of layers to allow for maximum adaptability. So if you take the lifespan of the different layers into consideration in your design, you could already think of, well, what if I want to replace a certain product? Or what if I want to repair new piping or wiring? What if I want to install a new climate system in my building? How should I get access to it? And so how should it all be fit together in order to make it easily maintainable, easily reusable, and demountable as well? And this is, of course, also not a new idea, but now with this circular economy aspect, it ties together the thoughts we have already developed in the past centuries sometimes on what a sustainable or a good building should look like, and how we can now organize and design it accordingly as well. Some other examples of circular buildings. Well, you can think of reusing materials of a demolished building. As you can see on the picture in the left-hand corner, it's our coffee corner at our faculty from old window frames of a demolished building. But you can think of containers being used and designed as student living places. You can think of the reuse of a whole building by making it, stripping it down and then rebuilding it, using as much as the materials that became available of it. On the bottom left, you see another type of demountable buildings that was designed more than 20 years ago. And the idea was that it would have the lifespan, the technical lifespan would be in line with the economic lifespan, and so it would only last for 20 years. But it is still very popular, and it has been rented out for the next 10 years as well. So the economic lifespan and the technical lifespan have been prolonged for another 10 years, but it is completely demountable as well, and made of as much renewable or reusable materials as possible. Another two examples you see are of a new community house built in a circular way with all the products listed there with a whole system listing what kind of materials are in there, who owns it, and how to take them apart and how to reuse them. And on the right bottom corner you see an example of a business park that has been developed in a circular way as well, including all the infrastructure as well. And the idea is that when this building is no longer when there is no longer a need for it, it can be removed, and also the whole infrastructure can be removed as well, so the land can be given back to nature as it was before. Of course, with all these buildings in question, some questions come along about the lifespan of these buildings and the extent to which we can foresee the future, and also the behavior of people in the future. So will we really demolish the building or demount the building in a responsible way as made possible by the design? Will we really reuse all those building materials and components as made possible? And that is something that only the future can tell, but at least we made it possible to do so. So then some of the challenges of making it. Well, there is the challenge of matching supply and demand. And here is one urban myth. It has popped up in a recent book again as well. It's very consistent, but I still want to share it with you because it's one brilliant idea of a regenerative building and regenerative design. This is the Oxford Library, and there is one big beam made from a chestnut tree, and the story goes, even though it is being contested, but that the architect designing the building already planted a forest with these chestnut trees, so they would grow in time, in 500 years, to deliver a new beam for the library when it had to be replaced. So this is a beautiful story, whether it's true or not, but it shows the long-term perspective we need to think of circularity and the reuse and the responsible use of material. But of course there is a big time lapse at hand as well. And what I said, to what extent can we look into the future and also stimulate certain behavior in the future? Well, that is something for us to consider. There are also some quantity challenges. So do you have, to take the example of the library, do you have the chestnut tree available, and do you have, if you want to build a big building, do you have enough of those trees available to produce all the beams that you need? Then there is also the issue of the quality control. Once you demolish buildings or demount buildings, and even though you do it in a responsible way, then the question is, well, how to make sure, how can the buyer or the organization that will reuse it, how do they know if it's of sufficient quality after it has been used for such a long time, once it has been taken apart, perhaps stored somewhere for a period of time? How do you know that you can assure the quality? So this is also something that we need to think of, and which will be a concern as well, especially from a liability point of view. And well, for logical reasons, the build or the construction sector and the building sector are very risk-averse out of liability concerns. So of course they are wondering, well, how could we make sure that the right quality is in place, is ensured? So that's another aspect to address. And And then in terms of procurement, there is always this question of, well, what to ask for and what to put in your bid. And then you need often definitions. But as we have seen, and I've given you one definition which still can give a wide area of opportunities of how to fulfill that definition of circularity. So how to define circularity in a tender, for example. That is something that is being experimented with at the moment by both suppliers and commissioners. And it's something that we need to find out together as well. But it is, these procurement policies are a big instrument to use usually to get these initiatives going. One example of the supporting instruments that are being developed all over the world, there are these kinds of initiatives. This is one on building passports, and it shows that you can, or it's pleased to have, like you have for humans, you have a passport, that also for buildings you should have a passport stating of, what is in there. Of course, again, a question is how to keep it up to date and how to make sure that that it is reliable, and that is also one of these questions that need to be answered. But it is already one of the actions that we can take, and it is already a start to think in the longevity and the value of all the resources that we use. In search for a business case, this concept developed by a number of actors shows the value hill, it is called. And it shows that, on the left-hand side you see our linear economy, where we quickly add value, a lot of value, but then also quickly destroy it. And what we need to try to achieve is to add value, but then retain it as long as possible in a high quality, as high as possible as well. And this is a very illustrative picture of the challenge we're up to. And also these pictures look very appealing and very logical as well, but getting there is still quite a challenge, because our whole sector has been organized, some of these sectors have been organized also to reuse materials in a lower quality or in a lower value. So it really requires a whole reorganization of sectors, but also of our economic system, in which we prioritize different values and start to calculate values in a different way. Well, here another handy tool, I should say, the levels of circularity, the 10 R's, or the R ladder it's called. It's inspired by the ladder of Lansing, already developed in the 1980s to show our preference for waste management, that we should try to avoid producing waste. And once we have it, we should try to get rid of it in the most responsible way. And here it has been more specified even into 10 R's. And the first ones are about reducing and narrowing the amounts of materials that are being used. Another pair of R's are about slowing down the speed by which it is being used and goes through the life cycle. So try to, once it is in the system, try to keep it there as long as possible. And the lower R's are about what to do when we no longer need it and we can no longer use it in a higher quality way, then we might recycle it or recover it. There are some advantages. This is all what I've just told you is all still are all still examples and innovations and policies that have been developed from this closed loop focus. The importance of closing loops and closing supply chains and product chains. There are some advantages to this focus because it's unambiguous. Lots is about measuring existing methods that we have, like life cycle analysis. We can use it, material flow analysis. We can use it to estimate and assess the materials that are being used, go in and out. What can we recover, reuse, etc. So there is already quite some knowledge and tools that we can fall back on to make this happen. It also leads to progress, to nice results, to showcases even that show the sector but also the wider public that it is possible that this circular economy, even though it sounds a far-fetched goal, it is possible to get there and to make it happen. And what it also shows that it's a learning by doing process, because you see over the years, and it is now quickly taking up in pace, the learnings, and you see in many projects all over the world you see new achievements taking place, and by sharing these best practices, these showcases, we can all learn from each other. There are some risks as well. One is that there is, it could lead to sub-optimization, to a low R bias. So if you use materials in a degraded way, or if you just focus on one material loop, you might run into the risk that you oversee other opportunities that might perhaps be more sustainable. For example, with the concrete industry, there are many initiatives now to make concrete more sustainable, which is very good. But besides making concrete more sustainable and reusable, there should always be also the consideration, well, what is the alternative material that we might use for concrete? And could there be a renewable material? And now you see that more and more buildings are being designed and produced and constructed with timber, with innovative timber products. And so that is also another side of this optimization from this loop perspective. So keep an eye open for alternatives and substitutes as well. Then there are the spatial economic effects of closing loops and the rescaling of loops. There is how to close these loops and where to do it. What space do you need and what are the effects of it? That is something that is not paid attention to very much, and I will come back to that quickly afterwards. Then there is the issue of power and politics. It is a rather technical exercise, this closing of loops, primarily driven by material analysis, energy analysis, etc. And sometimes forgetting that behind all these materials and the way in which they are used and produced and stored, there is a whole world of organizations, of public and private organizations, of users. There are lots of companies making their money out of it, people relying on it for the income. So there is also quite a big pressure on this whole on this whole debate, and certain innovations that might also put some organizations or some firms out of business, or they feel that their business is jeopardized. So there is also a political dimension and a power dimension behind it that should be considered. Then there is the economic dimension of circularity. So what we see now from this more technological-oriented perspective, that there are, from a material point of view, the perfect loop is being designed, and then people start searching for the business case, which is often hard to find then. So you could also wonder, well, perhaps it's good to start with looking at business opportunities and perhaps then see what is possible. And you might come to taking other steps, whereas there is no right or wrong in that, but there should be different roads to consider and different tracks to follow. And then, of course, there are the incentive structures that drive active behavior that should always be bared in mind. Now let's go to the perspective of urban metabolism and a more regenerative perspective of a closed-loop society. And there you see that, again, it is a flow-based perspective, and you see where the flows come from, and you want to reduce the inputs, what you see at the left-hand side, as much as possible, and you want to reduce the outputs as much as possible. And a city needs a lot of input, materials, resources to function. And you could consider the city like a human body which has a metabolism, which needs resources to live and operate. You can consider a city in the same way. And it needs organic, biological resources and materials. And energy and water, etc. And you need to make sure of, also on an urban level, to think of, well, how to best close those loops. But then, of course, you come perhaps to a different preference of skills to close the loop than you might come from purely a supply chain point of view. So, for example, a city might want to think, well, we think it is important that we use and reuse all the materials that we waste in a responsible way, and we want to reuse them in the proximity as much as possible to avoid transport with all the losses that come along and the emissions that come along as well. So that is also another way of looking at this circularity. There are, of course, many definitions again on how to conceptualize circular cities. And I'm not going to give you any at this moment, but I just want to share some examples with you, which will inspire you, set your mind to work. And think of, well, how can I contribute in my work to this circularity ambitions on an urban level as well? And just there are many definitions around, so please take a look at those. There are some new town developments that can be very inspiring. This is one in the Netherlands where it's a bit of love it or hate it example, but there's a large-scale new town based on decentralized sanitation and food provision, and we will have to see how it will work out in the future. There are many other aspects to consider here as well besides circularity, but it is a very interesting experiment to learn from, and you see that designing a whole or developing a whole district based on certain principles of circularity might give rise to a whole new concept of living together in an environment. Another example is the Darwin project in Bordeaux, in France. It is a transformation of an urban district, and it has been developed based on an understanding of the ecological opportunities of that particular area, but also of the ecological constraints. So in designing this, in making the redesign of this area and all the activities that could take place there in the field of living and working, there were these ecological considerations that played a key role in making the program and what could be developed there. Another example well known to Sweco is the example of the Stockholm Royal Seaport, which has been the port district has been transformed into a multifunctional area, and an analysis has been made prior to the development of this area of the different resources and flows that should be part of this area. And so by making this whole analysis prior to the development of this area, a whole circular district could be developed in which not just the material flows but also the water flows and the energy flows have all been connected, and this has given rise to a truly integrative development of this area. Adapting urban areas is another challenge, which is of course something that should be on our mind as well, because most of our cities are already there, even though we are developing a lot as well, but especially in the bit older societies or parts of the world, parts with less growth, we have to adapt our existing urban areas to these circularity demands. And this is, a very old example already, but I still very much like it. In the 1970s, I think, or 1980s, the mayor of Curitiba in Brazil started to develop a circular city concept, even though it wasn't mentioned as such back then. But besides having this famous bus system developed, there were other aspects to it as well. So there was a waste management system created with separate waste collection, which offered jobs to unemployed and poor people, also often people who had been in prison or had been disadvantaged in life as well. So this created jobs as well. There were also programs on creating affordable homes by replacing favelas that were flooded on a yearly basis to more safe places, drier places. And at the same time, this offered the opportunity and the space to make green-blue infrastructures, which would make the city more resilient as well. So this is an example of a truly integrative perspective of adapting the city. Now, what we are from an area-based point of view, what we tend to do now in many cases in Europe, but also in some other places in the world, is that we make these Sankey diagrams. It's based on an input-output analysis of the flows of an area going in and out, and looking the purposes for which it is being used, and then see, well, where are the leaks and where can we find potential closures, and then start to design for it. This is again a bit technical perspective that might come up with good solutions, but in preparing these solutions, it is also important to not close the eye for other initiatives that are already happening in many cases in these cities, which might be on a more lower level of scale, which you perhaps cannot identify so easily when looking at such a schematic way to the city. And so here you see an example of a second-hand material shop that has been created on a very lower scale level. The question, especially when big companies start to interfere, when big redevelopment or transformation programs start to happen in an urban area, then the question is, well, is there still a place for these kinds of initiatives, and how to fit them into the bigger picture that you want to develop? And that is very important also for the public support of the whole circularity transition. Well, and this is also what I would like to say with this picture, with the participatory approaches that are being used more and more as well. You should also, in your designs of urban areas, you should also give freedom for people participating and stakeholders participating to develop their own initiatives. So there should be also space allowed to accommodate these initiatives. And one of the things with, and then we come to the challenges to address here, is that cities and regions need to plan for the circular economy, and especially the use of land is very crucial for a circular economy, because if you want to collect materials, if you want to rework them, remanufacture them, you need particular industries, you need space for it. And the question is, well, do you want, if the land price is such, or if the need for housing is such, that you all allocate the land for other functions than this circular economy, then the question is, well, where will it take place? And then you might come to long travel distances with all sorts of negative effects as well. So again, it's a question on the level at which you want to close the loops. And then I quickly jump to my final slide, because I see that we've almost gone through the whole hour. Time flies. There is, this slide I want to show you. I want to give to you a to-do list actually, for making your own contribution to a circular built environment, to circular cities. And one of the first questions we should all ask ourselves is how to make reuse and waste reduction, how do we really make it affordable, and how do we make it pay, as the circular economy concept promises us. And as long as we don't change certain rules of the game we live by, we operate by, then it is very difficult to make this society-wide transition. Another thing is that we should do is that we should focus on a higher value recovery, and also policies, whether they are public or private, they should focus on stimulating or demanding value recovery at a higher level. The third bullet states that these supply chain perspectives to circular economy, they should be developed in tandem with these urban regenerative perspectives on the circular economy, so that it's not just a bunch of circular buildings within an urban area that is being redeveloped that, brands it as circular, but that it also includes the infrastructures, the systems, and the community taking place in there. The effects as rebound, lock-in, path dependency, they are to some extent inevitable, since we are dealing with complex systems which always have some kind of lock-in, but they should be considered upfront. If you consider them upfront and be aware of it, you might want to say, okay, we know this, but we see the advantages as well, so this is the road available to us, but then think of future adaptations that might be possible as well. And last but not least, the circular economy is now very much focused to the material agenda, the product agenda, but please connect it to other agendas as well to avoid sub-optimization. For example, in the field of energy transition, some of these energy technologies are very material intensive and demanding a large amount of critical materials. So please consider that as well. Also from a health and safety point of view, if you want to make livable cities, healthy cities, how to connect this material perspective with all the emissions involved with the collection and manufacturing as well. How to connect this to these kinds of agendas. That opens up the opportunities to address it, the budgets to address it, but also the public support of it. And this will avoid the circular economy becoming a technical thing just being prepared by engineers, but that the circular economy is a transition to which we can all contribute, and that will contribute to a better urban living environment for all of us. I've come to the end of my lecture. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll see to it, and hopefully we can follow up. Thank you very much, and good luck with your circularity ambitions.
Thanks for watching. If you want to know more about Urban Insight, or if you want to subscribe to upcoming reports, please go to swecourbaninsight.com. This lecture will be available to watch again. Please share the link with anyone you might think interested. For now, enjoy the rest of your working day.